Now let me tell you why I'm going to spotlight on her. It's because of this particular topic. That topic is recycling. You see, there are two kinds in my career, there are two kinds of people in this world. Those kinds who are data-driven, and when they have to make major decisions, they don't make it with. You really have to take the time and the effort. That time and the effort requires you to talk to people on the phone and talk to them in person and find out what they have and the kind of answers they're giving you, because you cannot make a definitive conclusion about anything unless you have all of the data. But there are some people out there, a good portion of them, who really fly by the seat of their pants. You see, there are some people who say, if they build it, they will come, from that great movie that I've seen. As a matter of fact, we know a third of the population of the United States who said, gee, I'm not going to get a vaccine. 70% said yes. Why? Who are smarter than us in a particular genre, and that's the vaccination. So why Sherry Sachs? Because Sherry Sachs has really done an outstanding job in taking a look at our present situation, and if we're going to change into it, because I'm not an expert. But I will tell you this, there are two cities right around us, Pepper Pike, Shaker Heights, to do it. But they do it in a manner which I understand is truly a professional manner, and they get the job in that particular subject matter. My suggestion to you is you can either do one or two things. Talk to Sherry, you have to take the time to do it. Taxes, and lived here for 45 years. It is beyond my understanding why he has not. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I bid you adieu, and hopefully you'll do a wonderful job. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anybody else who would like to address the city this evening? And if so, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record first.
Hey everyone, my name is Max Malley from 1 John Kerr Boulevard. I want to talk again about recycling. So I'm here because I care about this community, this city, and I'm also here for everyone who cannot be here tonight too. Recycling is an ancient facts and figures. There is no hiding from them. But let me recite the urgency of this matter. Sustainability within the city and within homes. John Carroll, being the city's namesake and largest employer, has signed on the Pope Francis's Tlci initiative, which will release a survey with all relevant intern and vice president of the environmental issues group. Mayor Brennan visited the student government last week. She was immediately shocked by the state of recycling in University Heights. After hearing that recycling rates dropped as little as 4% last year, she wished to express her immense concern for the state of recycling. The interaction between humans and the natural environment is an omnipresent relationship. The actions humans partake in directly impact and intersectional dilemma, subject to debate. An obvious interaction, however, that should not be questioned into debate is the need to modernize recycling. Recycling is a necessary step in order to move towards a circular economy. Make and waste is outdated and degradative. Recycling is necessary. Climate change is real and happening right now, which I'm sure none of us would argue about. Environmental health, social equity, and economic vitality have all already been factors affected by climate change. If we cannot recycle properly, how can we continue to make necessary changes? Why are we not taking the actions to modernize? Ignoring a problem and its culture we live in today, waste has only increased every year. I urge you all to reconsider the circumstances of recycling in University Heights. Please, and make a positive impact. Thank you all so much for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Malley, and thank you also to Ms. Cobb. Is there anybody else here to address the city this evening?
Winifred Weiser, 2177 Jackson Boulevard. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for posting, and I'm being very serious, for posting on your Facebook page about Cleveland Heights starting garbage and recycle pickup and rolling carts. It's great news because we can finally get real data as to whether using carts will increase our recycling rates. And I know you're very close with individuals in Cleveland Heights, and I'm sure you can track that kind of data and get that kind of data from them. The other thing that I think would be interesting to discover is what is the contamination rate in those carts as well. That way, we will know if we're going to spend close to $250,000 on the carts, that it will be a good investment and achieve the goal of increasing recycling. I don't think there's anyone that disputes that we do need to improve our recycling rate. But what is the problem? And that we need data to find. Is the problem that people are not recycling? Or is the problem that we don't provide a way for them to recycle? And that would help. On top of that, the recent information that Councilwoman Sachs found and her proposal to go out for grants to update our carts to allow for loose recycling, if loose recycling is the solution, that could go forward. I know that Councilman King is skeptical that we can get those grants, but actually waiting at least 6 months to see what the Cleveland Heights program actually can generate allows us time to find out if those grants are real. And if those grants are real, it provides us a mechanism to actually use our current system and still do loose recycling. I think, though, that, underneath your post, you put, we do citizen comments at the start of the meeting, and I know that there were a lot of people that pushed to have people come and to defend recycling in one form or another. I do think, from the debate that broke out on University Heights discussion, that obviously this is a topic that maybe we need to have a public meeting about, but public in the sense of residents. We can't just continue to hear from one section or another section, which takes us back to the Loving survey that has been held up. But there were a couple of suggestions that popped up at the end of that discussion that perhaps could get the survey out if both items are addressed the same way, either by cart or by backyard. That, I think, is critical. I don't have any problem, and I have found that people who live in this city, who pay the freight for this city with their wage taxes and their property taxes, all of us have the right to speak out and to provide our case. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiser. Is there anybody else here who would like to address the city this evening?
I'm Jeffrey Pearl. I'm from Lafayette Drive. I'm holding in my hand the 2022 residential curbside collection methods list of all the communities. 59 communities listed in Cuyahoga County. Of those, 43 of them are using the same pickup method as the mayor has recommended, using the carts. What is beyond me is how we keep talking about it and we go back and forth about this, and we don't do anything. We keep the system the way it has been, and all that has been talked about by council primarily until the meeting last week that I attended, everything had to do with cost. And it's not just a matter of cost. We also can't promote to recycling to those people who are doing recycling. It has to be, you have to have more training, and I'm glad that Mrs. Sachs had brought that up. We have to re-educate the entire community in how to recycle. I noticed this morning when I'm getting my trash out that there are a lot of things that are out along with people's trash that could be recycled. How many people were using blue bags? Not as many as you might think. So blue bags have to go, have to be considered as something that we do away with before we're told that we can't use it at all. I would further say that there are some communities that are doing some loose recycling like we are, or I'm sorry, doing blue bags as we are. It has been discussed other methods. Shaker Heights is using, instead of blue bags, they're using carts. Cleveland Heights have been doing bags, and they're going away from that. Pepper Pike, that has been discussed. I was over there today. There are some things to be said for looking into methods other than what we're doing. But when you have the vast majority should be thought of with stronger consideration than it has, and not just dismiss it out of hand. And I hope the council reconsiders what they have already decided about the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Pearl. Is there anybody else here who desires to address the city? Well, if not, there are a number of emails that Kelly, Mrs. Thomas has collected. We do have we do ask that people email info@universityheights.com if they have a comment, and that it be made before 4 o'clock. A lot of these weren't in info, but I'll go ahead and read them anyway. First one is from S.T. Goulden, 4453 Bain Tree Road. Dear Mayor and Council, I'm writing today to thank Council for voting not to implement curbside recycling bins. In my opinion, as a 28-year resident who grew up in UH and then married and moved back to UH 54 years in total, the backyard trash pickup is a valued city service. I also feel the plastic bins are unsightly and not in line with our city's motto, City of Beautiful Homes. Please keep up the good work, Council. University Heights does not need to model itself after Cleveland Heights, Southview, Political Beachwood. From Alexander Teeter of Charney Road, to whom it may concern, I would like trash pickup to continue as is. Please do not eliminate the pickup. Thank you. From from Erica Colton, 2452 Charney Road. No changes to be made in trash/recycling methods. I wish this to be read into the record. From Marcia Greenis, North Cliff Road. My name is Marcia Greenis and I live on North Cliff Road. I've been here for 55 years. I am 79 years old and am very arthritic. I love the fact that the city has scooters and has backyard pickup. I love this city and all things that help the elderly. If scooter pickup is stopped, it might make a lot of elderly think about moving. We cannot drag it out to the curb. Please keep the scooters. And from, there's no last name or address on this. Just says Carrie. There's one from Elaine Gajewski, no address, but I am writing to let you know that I strongly support keeping the current backyard pickup of garbage and recycling. It's one of the things that make our city special and unique. I would appreciate if you would please read this into the record at tonight's council meeting as I'm unable to attend. Thank you very much, Elaine Gajewski. Toby Bresky, no address. For the many elderly who do not have an attached garage, it is imperative that you maintain our backyard pickup. Toby Bresky, University Heights. From Margaret Duffy Friedman and Jeffrey Friedman, 4521 University Parkway. Mayor Brennan and University Heights City Council members Jeffrey Friedman and I, Margaret Duffy Friedman, have concerns about the future of our backyard rubbish recyclable collection service. As residents of University Heights collectively for over 50 years and members of the University Heights City Council collectively for over 30 years, our concerns and care for University Heights run deeply. For the record, Jeffrey and I would like to see the city continue the backyard rubbish recyclable collection service in its present format. We would be glad to complete a survey or participate in the appropriate committee as best practice in city government would expect should this rubbish recyclable collection service be reviewed, assessed, altered in any manner. We look forward to supporting comprehensive and quality stewardship in this matter. Thank you for your time and consideration. Then from Christine Bryan of 2472 Charney Road. As a resident of University Heights, I wish my citizens' remark below to be read into the record at tonight's 321 meeting. I strongly oppose the proposal for a separate curbside recycling service for residents of University Heights for the following reasons. One, curbside does not yield more recycling over backyard pickup. Witness both Pepper Pike and Shaker Heights Recycle in the backyard and yield the same percentage of recycling as curbside recycling in both Beechwood and South Euclid. Furthermore, Shaker uses loose recycling, Pepper Pike uses blue bags, and South Euclid uses loose in the front. They are all within 1% of each other, so changing what recyclables are put in does not change recycling percentages. Number two, the cost. This dual plan costs the city much more than our existing plan. The dual plan requires a one-time cost of $240,000 for the bins plus an additional $100,000 per year of personal expense for this dual program. This is a poor use of city funds. If any change to our existing service were wanted by its residents, a much more reasonable option would be to look to Shaker and retrofit our Capotas to handle loose recycling. That cost is relatively minimal, and I am told there are grants available to fund part or all that retrofit. Number three, we are a city of beautiful homes. Weekly curbside bins will significantly reduce that reputation and ultimately our home values. In addition to being an eyesore, curbside pickup does not consider how many residents are physically unable to haul a large item down their driveways and return bins to the back, nor does it consider our narrow tree lawns, our winter snow, or how to enforce same-day return of bins to individuals' residents' backyards. Number four, I am not sure citizens are aware of what is truly recyclable and what can easily contaminate their best efforts and intentions when recycling. If the city made efforts to educate, which would be a nominal cost versus what is being proposed, we might end up with a lower volume of recycling but a higher yield to what is truly recyclable and favorable for the environment. Number five, finally, as a citizen, I'm appalled that this is even being considered without first asking what we, the residents, want. I understand the city has already paid for an impartial survey that was completed and was to be sent out to all residents. There should be no delay or additions to an impartial survey by any public servant or any individual within the community. Why has the paid-for impartial survey not been sent to us? Changes of this magnitude should involve all residents given all the facts and not just a select few. Respectfully submitted, Christine Bryan. Finally, we have one more public comment from Richard Kenny of 4105 Meadowbrook Boulevard, which reads, I, Richard Kenny, am submitting the following written public comment with the request that it be read into the record at the City Council meeting scheduled for Monday, March 21, 22. The Mayor and City Council continue to consider the privatization or quasi-privatization of the garbage and recycling pickup in a manner that would result in terminating the back-of-house pickup. I support the continuation of current method as I believe it has numerous benefits that will be sacrificed with curbside pickup. One, convenience. Residents will need to drag oversized containers to the curb, and during the snow season, when several feet of snow accumulates on the tree lawn and remains there for weeks at a time, they will struggle to lift the oversized container. This is especially an important issue for seniors and residents with disabilities. 2, safety. Traffic flow will be impeded by the larger trucks stopping at each house with oversized containers later falling or being blown into the street before owner retrieves them. 3, aesthetics. Unsightly view of oversized containers lining the streets do not drive the ultimate decision. We are a community of people of diverse interests, preferences, and capabilities. There are numerous amenities and services that are provided by the city, some of which are enjoyed by many and some by a very few. As a community, we should take care to support amenities and services that others consider important and useful, even if there is a financial cost, and even we do not find those amenities and services important to ourselves. By way of example, I would guesstimate that less than 10% of the residents use the tennis court. Likewise, we build and continue to maintain the city pool, even though less than 50% of the residents use that facility. We recently built a city park just west of City Hall, recognizing that the city park is an important amenity for some of our community members. While it is unlikely that 50% of the residents utilize that park, we supported the construction and ongoing maintenance. The issue regarding the back of the yard waste pickup should be evaluated in the context of its importance to a segment of the community that feels strongly about the current service provided. Seniors and persons with physical limitations, along with others who simply view backyard pickup as desirable amenity, should be given the same consideration as those who do not benefit from the availability of the tennis courts, the city pool, and the city park. Finally, with regard to the anticipated survey, it is imperative that the survey not simply reference some vague alternative for curbside pickup and cost savings. There should be specifics as to whether the city would use its employees or whether the service will be fully private and residents from substandard performance. Most importantly, the survey questions should include the non-financial issues to be considered by the residents with a focus on a community approach and outcome. Respectfully, Richard Kenny. That concludes the submitted emails received by the clerk of council. There were no additional ones that were submitted info. So, last call on comments from the audience.
Mayor,
yes.
For the one for Carrie, is there a reason that's not going to be read in that?
I didn't read that one because I don't have a last name or name. I read the ones that had at least a full name. I mean, here, we do ask people who address the city to provide their name and address. If you happen to know Carrie's last name and address, I'll read it. Okay. Okay, well, if there are no further comments, then... Oh, I'm sorry, is there another comment? Yes, please, come up to the podium. You may take up to 5 minutes, Mr. Ashley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a difficult question. I know I...
Could you state your name and address for the record, just for
I'm Phil Atkin. I live on Rubyville Drive in University Heights. I know this is a difficult question. My own information is that almost everyone in University Heights loves to have a garbage picked up. I know I'm on a hillside house, and the other reality is recycling business is a continually changing enterprise. And I'm just wondering if other things were explored, like finding, instead of bags that are not recyclable, bags that are recyclable to collect the garbage, or some kind of container that could be disposed in the trucks that come by, or someone investigated modifying the pickup trucks or something, those little, so that they could separate them and somehow dump in the truck. One thing, I'm just trying to say that it seems as if there should be a solution that's more mechanical. recycling, which are continually changing. And the reality is that the community really wants the type of collection that we have. And I'm just wondering if any of those things have been seriously delved into.
Thank you.
Well, that's.
I am going to address some things in my report about recycling, so hopefully I'll answer some of your questions. And I'm happy to talk with you separately and as we do from time to time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hackett. Last call on comments from the audience. To the mayor's report and taking of action thereon. Under Article 7, Section 2 of the Charter, appointment to the City Planning Commission, appointments to the City Planning Commission are made by the mayor and are not subject to confirmation. Thus, the first items not on tonight's agenda have been removed. Matthew Casey is a principal and vice president of development, management, and business development at Zaremba Group, where he has managed expansion programs for several national and regional retailers. Mr. Casey is a graduate of John Carroll University and has lived in University Heights since attending JCU. Edward Rychek is an attorney in private practice, and after 4 years away from municipal volunteer work is back on our Planning Commission. Mr. Rychek previously served on Planning Commission under Mayors Rothschild and Minfeld as a former chair of the old City Beautiful Commission, former member and co-chair of the Parade Committee, and former member of the City Recreation Department. April Hirsch Urban was originally appointed to Planning Commission to the vacancy created by Ed Rychek's departure. Ms. Urban is recently a project manager for athletics for the Center of Urban Poverty and Community Development at Case Western. First, the next regular meeting of Planning Commission, I thank also our community. Since the last meeting, University Heights Work Road intersections along Lawrenceville Center Road, thanks to a grant approved by the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency, also known as NOACA. We're committed to making our city a. When complete, the project will install 2 new crosswalks at the Hillbrook and Traymore Road intersections, along with installing curb extensions or bump outs to shorten the crossing distance while enhancing pedestrian visibility. The project will also add new green space. NOACA will provide NOACA will provide $251,000 for the project, with University Heights contributing just $26,000. I know Council approved a 20% match last year, and this is approximately 10%. This project will improve the quality of life for all residents in University Heights, from young families to senior citizens to college students. Providing more clearly marked crossings with flashing beacons on Lawrenceville Center Road enhances the safety of pedestrians crossing this major thoroughfare. Credit goes to Jeff Engelbrecht, University Heights Director of Housing and Community Development, for his strong work on the grant application. As I always say, the greatest asset this city has are the people who work here. They get things get done because the people here do them. In addition to implementing the administration's vision on housing and community development, Mr. Engelbrecht has now secured a $250,000 grant to make the city safer. I also thank Dr. Sherry Crahan, Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at John Carroll University, who wrote in an October letter that the university supports this project. The NOACA area for transportation and environmental planning encompasses the Cleveland, Elyria metropolitan region, includes 5 Ohio counties, that of Cuyahoga, Geauga, Lake Lorraine, and Medina. For the record, I represent the Heights region on NOACA, where I just completed the term as chair of the NOACA Finance and Audit Committee. Now, continuing on the subject of NOACA, last week was NOACA's Climate Action Summit. I attended the summit with Councilperson Brian King as my guest. Stated at the summit by Ronald Richard, President and CEO of the Cleveland Foundation, combating climate change is the moral imperative of our age. Among the panels were one on making the case for climate planning and another on developing a regional approach for Northeast Ohio. We heard from numerous speakers, including the City of Oberlin's Sustainability Coordinator, Linda Arbogast, Cuyahoga County Director of Sustainability Mike Foley, and keynote speaker, Director of Transportation for America, Beth Osborne, among others. Takeaways from the program include seeking to work regionally on a sustainability plan, building upon the county's existing sustainability plan while working together to lead on this issue. Last week, I addressed the John Carroll University Student Government. Among the topics discussed there, sustainability, among others. However, sustainability is a leading issue of concern among young people in this community. Thank you for your service and continued advocacy to JCU student government, to President Grace Guilfoyle, and all the student leaders. Two made the name, although at least one, Max Malley, is here this evening. I was here part of public forum this evening. John Carroll University is hosting a climate change and sustainability teach-in on March 30th from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Dolan Science Center atrium. It will feature 3 concurrent interactive panel discussions featuring faculty, staff, and students. Panel discussions will be followed by small breakout sessions where participants will discuss and brainstorm how to increase sustainability in their own lives, as well as on campus and the larger community. This is from their announcement. John Carroll University will be one of approximately 1,000 colleges, high schools, and parishes meeting that day to discuss climate change and how it can be addressed. As climate change accelerates, we have seen increased flooding, fires, and record-shattering temperatures, and yet we still have both the time and the tools to change the future. The teach-in is designed to educate and motivate people to take individual and group actions to address climate change. Specific action steps will be collected and posted so that individuals can follow our progress as we transition to a cleaner and more just world. As mayor of the city of University Heights, JCU has invited me to the event. However, no invitation is required. The event is free and open to the public, and I encourage all here with an interest in sustainability to attend. Immediately following the JCU Student Government presentation last week, I attended a meeting of Council Service and Utilities Committee. The one formal recommendation made at that committee meeting was a motion and vote to support administration's continuing discussions with Rust Belt Riders to establish a compost drop-off location in the city of University Heights for people participating in the Rust Belt Riders program. I favor finding a way for the city to work with Rust Belt Riders and will report back to the community once we are ready to make an announcement. While the record will reflect that no other motions were made or votes taken, there was a lengthy committee discussion that I observed on the subject of recycling. I was glad to hear that there at the committee that there is no intention to end residential recycling pickup, and I'm glad we all agree on that. Beyond that, there were a lot of statements made and conclusions seemingly drawn at the meeting that may require further review. While no vote was taken following the meeting, I've been advised by council members, and I've seen online council members advising the public that a formal recommendation is made to administration along the lines of the following. Quote, for administration to prepare, present, and implement backyard collection of both rubbish and loose recycling with the goal of improving University Heights' recycling rate while lowering its costs, which is believed not to be insurmountable, end quote. Unfortunately, this recommendation, be it formal or informal, is not supported by the May 2020 solid waste study. The study reports at pages 29 and 34 that loose collection of recyclables with a manual bin would result in an estimated increased cost of $93,574 annually, rising to $108,339 by 2023 and $113,429 by 2028. That's $113,429 by 2028. Per the study, using 2018 figures, we pay $23.74 per house per month with the current method of pickup, and that's per page 22 of the report. That's already the third highest rate in the county. This proposed change of loose recycling in a backyard bin manually handled would result in an increase of almost $2 per house per month and climb from there. The position that implementing a system of loose recycling picked up in the backyard would somehow lower costs is not supported by the study or by any other authority to date. In contrast, the recycling carts administration put in the 2022 Putting People First budget was a partial implementation of the suggested alternative for the city recommended at the conclusion of the study report. I refer the public to pages 34 and 35 of the report for that conclusion. Semi-automated rubbish and recycling together would save $58,598. As this would be a partial implementation, we should expect the savings to be less. As the study also observed the limitations on cardboard pickup in our current methods, see the study at pages 32 and 33, the city stands to improve cardboard recycling, which would tend to improve the total recycling rate for our city. Either way, we know that the proposal as attributed to last week's Service and Utilities meeting results in a substantial increase in cost per the May 2020 Solid Waste Report. I also want to again clear up the subject of the survey for the residents, and of the residents, before the residents. A survey is an option raised in the May 2020 Solid Waste Study at page 31, including surveying on the subject of a, quote, premium service fee for side door service, end quote. Notably, last year's Service Utilities Committee removed questions from the draft survey that administration asked for regarding cost of the service. In my view, our ask about questions of cost was consistent with our study. And certainly, asking no questions about costs is inconsistent with the advice the city received from our consultants on the subject of the survey of the community. This is why administration did not approve the survey as edited by the committee, and did not and will not mail it in that form. Again, it is the Service and Utilities Committee that did not follow the study's recommendations on the survey. As the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Administrative Officer of the city, I did not and will not release a survey that does not comport with the advice on the survey provided in the 2020 Solid Waste Study. For any member of council to say that cost is not important, I would remind all council members that in September of 2020, the city had a discussion about recycling and its costs. 3 members of the city council voted against the current recycling contract, citing as grounds the cost. So, of course, cost is a factor. At least it was at the time that we entered our current contract with Kimball, which expires this year, necessitating that the city act now to implement the recommendation of the solid waste study, at least as it pertains to recycling. Let's take a step back here. At the City of University Heights, we have Jeff Picorni, a service director with a degree in engineering and decades of experience in this field. We brought in expert consultants, Jim Scora and his team at GT Environmental in 2009 and again in 2019 to provide the city expert guidance based on a review of our city's solid waste collection practices and based on industry standards. That culminated in the May 2020 Solid Waste Study report. To discard all of that based upon the anecdotal evidence presented at the March 15, 2022 Service and Utilities meeting is simply not well taken by the administration. Based on that, city administration will not be pursuing grants or taking other steps to modify buggies, not when there is nothing but wishful thinking and documented increased costs to back up the suggestions discussed in committee. Administration's work at modernizing recycling will continue to be consistent with the findings and recommendations set forth in the May 2020 report. I urge all council members and interested members of the community to again read the report. It is on the city's website on the Service Department page. I must address this one point. I would caution city council members that the 2020 annual report and residential recycling report published by the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District, that's this report right here, makes no findings as to the method of pickup and its bearing on recycling rates. This is not discussed at all in their document. Those of you citing this as a source for the proposition that method of pickup has no bearing on recycling rates is inaccurate, and it's a misuse of this document. Nowhere in the report is there any analysis, much less a conclusion, stating that. At the next City Council meeting on April 4, 2022, we will have a presentation by the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District. Executive Director Elizabeth Biggins-Raymer and Assistant Director Jessica Finos will be here to address recycling issues above and beyond the presentation made by Karen Miller at the Service and Utilities Committee meeting last month, above and beyond the matters raised in the district annual report on residential recycling. As mayor and as a member of the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste Policy Committee, I'm delighted to have them as our guests at the next meeting. I appreciate the stated desire of council to seek further education on the subject of recycling, and I hope it proves to be educational. Thank you. This concludes my report. Next up is reports and communications from the City Council and the taking of action thereon. Are there any reports from City Council?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Mrs. Weiss.
Over the last 2 weeks, Council has had various committee meetings, which will be detailed in committee reports. Our Tech Advisory Committee is beginning the process to bid for an IT service contract, and our Service Committee is continuing ongoing education regarding the rubbish collection study. One that I would like to focus on here is the Council of the Whole retreat. Council came together in an informal setting to map out short-term and long-term goals for the city. It was an excellent meeting with some new and fresh ideas, some of which are public art and landmarks commissions, a farmer's market, pickleball, formalizing sub-facility and infrastructure committees, formalizing a sub-facility and infrastructure committee, and to begin the facilities review, and beginning the process for a charter review, which is much overdue, and much more. I did want to clarify on the record some statements on the mayor's official signing statement of the budget. I want to reiterate again as an accountant what good practice is. The city is not a cash cow by any means. We had to dip into reserves to attain this budget. Operations should never be using reserves. That means the organization does not have the revenue to sustain their operations. This budget passed overwhelmingly 6-1 by council, who acts as the checks and balance to the executive branch. The administration needs to respect the democratic process that he took an oath to protect. Regarding recycling, Councilwoman Sachs, as I believe Mr. Miller pointed out in public comment, has done an incredible job in researching backyard recycling by actually going to Pepper Pike and Shaker Heights, who are our neighbors and do backyard recycling well. She presented her findings, as the mayor stated, in the last service and utilities meeting that I hope everyone views. Loose recycling is absolutely doable with little or no cost. The study that the mayor is referring to, the 2020 rubbish study, demonstratively showed that dual collection is higher than either curbside or backyard. Grants are available. I hope that the mayor does reconsider and take a moment to look for grants for bins and equipment to retrofit our Kubotas. That was a large cost in the study that grants are available for. And I do challenge the mayor to seriously consider to investigate this option so our city can increase our recycling, which everyone on council favors. No council person ever said to stop recycling in this budget. Regarding senior services, yes, we do need more robust senior services. The city needs to think creatively on how to accomplish this. Sharing resources with other cities is one that can have great benefit. Utilizing current communications and community outreach positions are their namesake and should tackle this ever so important piece of programming. Let's now discuss zoning. Our economic development director has eagerly awaited this signing, as had council. Mrs. Drucker has openly expressed her interest in heading this endeavor. That is, we do not need a city planner because the company that we chose actually has a city planner on staff. In discussing the 2 additional service people, the service director did state that 2 additional staff members were needed for recycling, for curbside recycling. He was asked directly twice and gave the same answer. At this time, if we are not doing curbside recycling, we do not need 2 additional staff members. Finally, let's conclude with the sunshine laws. No sunshine laws were ever broken, period. Every council person is allowed to talk to another council person one-on-one or without a quorum. I probably speak to council members personally at least once a week about issues. Nothing was decided behind closed doors. We had 2 finance meetings that were both close to 2 hours long. When I proposed adjustments to the budget, I asked everyone if there were any comments, changes, or suggestions. This budget was not a done deal before the meeting. This concludes my comments. I do know that I believe Councilman Rock has a couple comments as well.
Yes, thank you. So I do need to take this opportunity to correct the record regarding a separate letter that I received, an 8-page letter that I received from the mayor on March 9th. You know, I shouldn't have to engage in this pettiness, but the letter contained lies, and so it has prompted a response on the record. In that letter, the mayor accused me of lying 5 separate times regarding my position on building a new parking garage for police vehicles. Just for some context, the day before, the mayor, the vice mayor, and myself met with 2 representatives from GPD, the engineer that was tasked to do our study of facilities. Which is now estimated to cost $50 million. As a registered architect, I reviewed the program and determined it was more or less a director's wish list, rather than being based on any industry standard or best practices. For instance, I argued that a 400 square foot office for the mayor was oversized, that he didn't need a personal bathroom, and he certainly didn't need a personal shower, that we don't need 16 conference rooms, that a 200 fixed seat auditorium was not flexible for other functions, that the site couldn't even fit 600 parking spots, that bringing a jail back to UH was never previously discussed. Listen, I went on and on. However, it struck a nerve when I said, what other city has indoor police parking? Because now the mayor is trying to discredit me over it. There could be more, but I'm only aware of one city in the region that parks their full police fleet indoors, and they have a lot of money. So I asked the police chief, hey, can you provide this committee with a complete list of cities that park their fleet inside enclosed conditioned spaces? He could not produce that list, but instead gave me a list of only 9 cities that have indoor/covered parking for their vehicles. So it's still unclear which are covered and which cities have indoors, but it's under 9. I relayed all this to the mayor, and he called me a liar. So let the record reflect that I'm going to provide the clerk with the full conversation with the chief regarding the proposed indoor parking as it refutes the mayor's claims. His letter also alleges that I and others are, quote, continuing to defund the police. No one is defunding the police. No such thing was ever suggested, and my voting record supports that. You know, to borrow a recent line from the mayor, who actually borrowed this line from the late Senator Moynihan, and who, by the way, also borrowed a conceptual rendering of the new municipal facilities from Streetsboro, and is now advertising it as our own, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And then to go on to formally ask me to publicly apologize and step down. For what? For questioning where police cars park when they're not on patrol? It's a bit much. Well, listen, I'm not going anywhere. And you're not going to get your public apology for raising objections, which is council's duty as the checks and balances. You're out of line and you're out of touch. This particular behavior is becoming a trend. Just moments ago, we heard you announce your nominations to replace 2 members of the Planning Commission that you fired via email over the weekend because, in my opinion, they are both independent thinkers and did not vote your way on your push to bring the bus depot back to UH. And because one is an architect as well, and met with you for coffee 2 weeks ago and told you separately that your building plans are over the top. So it cost them their job. Again, I didn't want to have to dwell on this silliness, but your letter necessitated a formal response. People disagree with you. Get over it.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Is there anybody else on council who has anything they'd like to report this evening? Okay, we'll turn now to the agenda. Item D on the agenda is ordinance 2022-16, enacting codified ordinance section 1424.14 entitled engineering fees and declaring an emergency. Mr. McConville, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. This ordinance arose out of some recent discussions I've had with our engineer, Mr. Tlci. It's been the city's custom and practice over time to include in our permit fees a fee for engineering services. However, we don't actually have a codified ordinance that addresses that. And so this is a cleanup ordinance that is intended to make it clear that as a matter of law, the city has a right to pass through our engineering inspection fees to any developer. This ordinance will be of particular importance as it relates to some upcoming development by what we hope will be some large developers. And I would defer to Mr. Tlci to describe to you exactly what kind of services are passed along to the developers, but can assure you that this is a common practice throughout the state, and would urge you to adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. Mr. Tlci?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a standard practice. We represent several cities in Northeast Ohio, and this is the way it is done, from starting with the plan review itself down to inspections that we have certain expertise on, whether it be stormwater management, whether it be the asphalt and concrete they're pouring. And normally, the city should not have to pay for that. The developer, that's a part of doing business. They do this in other cities. They pay for these fees in other cities. There's no reason the city of University Heights should pay for it. It should be a pass-through. I believe this ordinance makes it a pass-through. And it's one of those things where I estimate up front what I think it's going to take, and they have to put a deposit. If it doesn't take all that money, they get the money back. It's not like we keep it. It's strictly a pass-through without a markup from the city. And can I believe we do have some major, hopefully, projects coming that we've heard about in the city, and it's going to take some time and effort on our part, and I believe the developers should be paying for that.
And that is correct. It's simply a pass-through. There's no markup. There's no administrative fee or anything like that. The ordinance is drafted to indicate that if there are funds left over on deposit with the city, they'll refund it to the developer.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. Thank you, Mr. Tlci. Are there any questions or comments regarding this item? And if not, is there a motion to adopt on emergency? Mrs. Blank.
This came to council without any backup documentation. And while I appreciate, certainly and respect Mr. McConville and Mr. Tlci, I would like to have more backup provided other than this, and would respectfully suggest that we put this on first reading, and once that documentation has been provided, that we could consider passage of it at our first reading meeting.
Is there documentation that you're looking for other than what Mr. Tlci and Mr. McConville
I'd like to see it in writing.
presented?
I am uncomfortable when things just land on the agenda and there is no backup. It's not done that way in other cities, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Thank you, Mrs. Blackfield. Mrs. Weiss.
Mr. McConville, is there it's on emergency for, I don't know if it's Mr. Tlci or Mr. McConville. Is there an urgency for this? Is there a deadline?
I don't think we have any pending project that we're worried about. Hopefully I won't be able to say that for much longer, but no, I think it could survive another day.
Yeah, there's no urgency.
Yeah.
And is there backup to be provided?
I question what that is. My rates are reviewed by you, the city council, every year. That's the same rates that I would charge the developers. It's not like we charge a premium to them. Whatever rates are approved by the city, hourly rates, that is, for an engineer, designer, inspector, a surveyor, whatever. Those are the same rates we charge for the whatever service we get at the University Heights. I don't know what other.
I looked at a couple of ordinances in neighboring communities. I can provide those to you.
That would be helpful. I mean, the other department directors are required and always supply backup when they bring something before this body, so I would appreciate if you do that as well. If nothing else, then giving your expertise.
I'll put together a memo and send you the materials that I looked at developing the ordinance, and we can go from there.
Thank you. And I thank you, Mr. Tlci, for giving us that as well.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
Excuse me. Mr. Tlci, when last did we pass through your fees to a developer? When was that last done in the city without an ordinance being
Well, it was written into the development agreement for a couple of different projects, the bigger projects. And if it's not, then the city has paid my fees. Yeah. I've been asked to either review plans or go send an inspector or go out to the field and make a judgment on something. And I always bill to the city, and whether they pass it through or not, that's up to the city to do.
Mr. Kennedy, how many times over the past 3 years has the city absorbed the fees that we could have otherwise passed on?
I would have to get back to you on that.
As part of the documentation that Ms. Blankfeld provided, if you would provide a summary of the instances over the past 3 years that the city has, provided, and Mr. Kennedy, in your own judgment, if the number of development projects is skewed because of COVID, if you can go back further into our history to when we had more development projects going, I'd like to better understand when those were passed through or when they were not, when they were absorbed by the city.
I don't know if it counts, but when the Eastern Gas Company is in here doing replacing gas lines, my inspector is out there watching them because I've been asked to do that. Those fees are passed through. Dominion East Ohio pays for that. I don't know if that counts as a developer, but it's passed through.
And Mr. McConville, was there some event or contract that instigated your view that a ordinance was necessary or proper?
Yes, we had a invoice that was provided to Zicker & Kine, and they took issue with the invoice and said we don't think we have to pay these fees. And when we looked to our code, we did not have an ordinance that supported passing through those fees. In discussion with Mr. Tlci, he indicated it's been customary for permit seekers to be provided with this type of fee, and that is the genesis of the filling this gap.
Thank you. So I think, just to give you an idea, I think generally, and I don't mean to speak for Ms. Blankfeld, but rather than just putting an ordinance on the agenda without any backup documentation, one helpful thing would be to say, more recently in University Heights, there was a developmental project, specifically this development project. And what we found was that developer stated that they weren't going to pay those fees. The city therefore had to absorb fees in this amount.
Sure,
therefore, we find this ordinance to be proper. And so when I hear Ms. Blankfeld say, well, this is the documentation, and I hear some questions from you, Mr. Tlci, and from you, Mr. McConville, about what the type of background documentation may be appropriate, those type of things that fill out an ordinance rather than just placing it on the agenda blank. And then also to the question that I asked for Mr. Kennedy, if in fact there had been other development projects where this had in fact been an issue, and over the past number of years, X amount of dollars has been absorbed by the city when it otherwise could have been passed through an ordinance, that type of information would be helpful.
Yeah, and I can tell you anecdotally, I'm not aware of any instances where this issue has come up. This issue was brought up with me through legal counsel, but we haven't had any other instance that's come to my attention during my tenure. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't happened in some other way. So,
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table Ordinance 2022-16, enacting codified ordinance section 1424.14 entitled Engineering Fees and declaring an emergency.
I'll second that.
All right, there is a motion to table item D by Mr. Gould, second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is the intention to take this from the table at the next meeting on second reading?
Yes, according if we have the documentation.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you.
Very good.
Did you say one comment?
Yes,
Before
Mrs.
we
White.
take a vote. Mr. McConville, was it a significant amount that the city was charged?
I believe the amount was $5,000. I would ask Mr. Tlci to verify that because I don't recall specifically, but that's the number that I'm remembering.
It was. I think that's what it was.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion table?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rod?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye. Motion carries. Next is item E, motion to seek bids for 2022 general yard nuisance abatement contract. Mr. Engelbrecht.
Good evening. City's looking for bids from contractors for yard abatement to include grass cutting, brush, hedges, leaf pickup, yard debris, with the advertisement to be posted on March 24th and March 31st. I'm looking for bids to be in by April 6th at 12 o'clock p.m. It is that time of year. Within the next couple of weeks, grass should be growing, and we'd like to get this in as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Mr. Engelbrecht, this is in line with previous year's programs, is that right?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Engelbrecht? If not, is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to seek bids for the 2022 general yard nuisance abatement contract. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mr. Rod?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye. Very good, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Next is item F, motion to approve price quote from Starfish for emergency support and service for a 3-month period of April, May, and June 2022. This is in line with previous price quotes that have been brought for emergency service by Starfish. The current period does end at the end of this month. I know the Tech Advisory Commission has met and has begun work, I understand, on an RFP. That is going to take some time yet still to finish, release, take bids, and select ultimately a vendor. In the meantime, support and service will still be needed. And this is for a 3-month period for April, May, and June 2022. So very similar to previous 3-month quotes on this. If there are no questions, I would ask for a motion to approve.
Mayor, may I comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, I reviewed the quote, and it's essentially identical to the one that we received in December. I don't have any concerns of what's included in the quote, my IT background. I do hope that it'll be the last one that we have to pass as an emergency. And I hope that we have a new managed security service provider taking over the management of our IT infrastructure by the time that this one expires.
Very good. Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you, Mr. King. I'm sorry, did you make a motion?
I'll make the motion, yes.
Oh, very good. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the price quote from Starfish for emergency support and service for the 3-month period of April, May, and June 2022. Is there a second? I'll second. Second by Mr. King. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I had a comment. This item was sent to us this afternoon, I believe, or this morning. I know the importance of this, and that's why I didn't ask to take it off the agenda. But most of us, all of us, have been during the day, and to properly review the information, if we could get it before, I think the ordinance is Thursday, so.
Right, I did not have, I was unable to take the call from Patrick Granahan and Starfish until Friday, and Friday was also then, late on Friday, they transmitted this. I didn't see it actually until this morning. I sent it in to Mrs. Thomas, so, I regret that is the timing. We are fortunate that this is similar in all respects, really, to previous items, and I thank you and the rest of council's indulgence for Is there any further discussion? There is none. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blanco?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next is item G. This is a motion to approve an additional $129,420 to be placed into escrow for the Cuyahoga Cedar Road resurfacing project. Mr. Cheney, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I apologize again for walking this on the agenda. ODOT opened bids on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th last week, and then which we weren't privy to. That was down in Columbus. On Friday afternoon at 1:30, they sent us an email talking about the bids and the cost of them, and then how much they expect the University of Heights to pay. And they asked for a deadline on March 23rd, which is Wednesday. So the bids came in. The low bid was $2.4 million. They had 4 bids. The highest bid was $2.45 million. So $2.4 million bid is within $50,000 over 4 bids. It is the number. It is what it is. The escalation in prices, again, due to what's happening in the construction industry, materials and trucking and everything else. We had put money into escrow already. I know we had a finance committee meeting about that. Dennis Committee took care of that. We are going to have to owe another $129,420 for this project to proceed. Of that, 1/3 will be paid by the City of South Euclid. They've committed to their share. And so, but since we're the lead agency, we have to put the money up front and they get reimbursed by the City of South Euclid. I know the mayor has an additional comment on this from the WAC, I believe.
Yes. I did speak today with Grace Tlci, the executive director of NOACA. A couple of things about this one. The executive director does encourage us, as South Euclid also has, to go ahead and approve the additional funds here. The Finance and Audit Committee of NOACA will be taking up this project. Generally was already planning on doing that with regard to seeking some or providing some additional funding. She herself cannot make the commitment as executive director before the Finance and Audit Committee has actually met, discussed, and voted. But generally speaking, the Finance and Audit Committee does approve the recommendation that comes in from the WACA for additional funding for projects. That's not likely to happen here until May. In fact, we know that's not going to happen until May. That's the next time the Finance and Audit Committee are going to meet. However, past practice and past policy has been that additional funding of up to 15% due to increase in costs is something that NOACA has done for communities like ours in a situation like this. And I'm not talking 15% of the $129,420, but 15% of what they awarded on the project. As you recall, this was a project that came in originally an estimate of about 1.8, and then they raised that by 25% to close to 2.3, 2.4 million. 2.3, I think, is what we were operating under, which is why we're a little bit short now with the low bid being at 2.4 million. But we are looking at a 15%. We're looking at NOACA picking up 15% of that. Well, picking up 15, splitting that 25%, 15-10 with University of Heights and South Euclid. So there is some relief that's anticipated ahead, but we need to take the leap of faith now with ODOT requesting that we respond by this Wednesday to approve the additional $129,420. South Euclid has expressed they've expressed without reservation that they would like to see this happen, and they are willing to shoulder their 1/3 share of this additional money. And again, I stress to them the importance of the project. In addition, there are some TLCI elements here. So in addition to the 15-10 split, Grace Tlci said there may be some additional funding that they would be able to, not my words, hers, look for in the couch cushion and commit to this project. So this is something where we're looking for the city to step up at this time in order to ensure the project goes forward. But I believe NOACA has our back on this with regard to getting some additional funding here on the project, given the circumstances of what happened here with regard to the delay of the project and the increased costs that were associated, and coming up with additional funding for the city, for the project, which will help the city of University Heights most, but also the city of Southfield. We're not going to know that for sure until May, and unfortunately, time being what it is, we need to make a decision here this evening. Mrs. Weiss.
Okay, I have many questions. First of all, is this mandatory to put that extra? It didn't sound from your explanation that it was mandatory, it was asked.
No, we signed an agreement with ODOT that, and their part of the cost of the project was capped. So anything that comes in with the bid, it's like part of our agreement, we can look at it out. The locals, University Heights and South Future, have to pick up the remaining costs, anything that comes in over that amount. Now, what the mayor said, and I've seen it happen, is NWACA has federal dollars, and they want to come in and help, but it's no fault of ours that the cost has gone up because of the war in Iraq, or Russia, or the cost of oil, or whatever. So they have then stepped to the plate and added more money to it. Right now, ODOT has no choice because we signed with them, and the amount that they pay is capped until they get more money from the NWACA.
So again, is this mandatory that we put this additional money in escrow?
Yes, otherwise the project won't go forward. Right.
Okay. The next question is, this should probably be an emergency. If this has to be done by, what you said, next week?
This Wednesday.
This
they
Wednesday.
said by 11 o'clock on Wednesday the 23rd.
Okay, the next question is, Mayor, you said 1510 of the 129?
No, 1510 of the money that NWACA committed.
The original money.
Right, the additional 25%. So when we went from 1.8 to 2.3, that's $500,000. I'm talking 1510 of that $500,000. Well, right, yes.
Okay, so, and you're saying that it's possible we might get some relief on the 129, but we're not sure yet.
Well, that's...
Because they have a meeting in May.
Right. I mean,
They encouraged us, they gave us good vibes that they would, but is it guaranteed? I can't say that. Because they do, the committee does have to meet in May and approve the extra funds. Correct.
Okay, and this 129 for the escrow, there's nothing additional to this project. This was the original project.
That's correct. Right. It's just an increase in the cost.
I have a lot of reservations because $130,000 is coming from our budget, and really, for such a significant amount, the Finance Committee really needs to meet to amend the budget. This is not just something that is easily remedied.
Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear who said that. Mr. Poole?
I agree. I'm so troubled that the state would put us in a position of giving us 3 days to respond to this amount of money. I mean, if it was the type of thing where we were able to go back to finance to address this as our, the entirety of our budget, we've already stretched once an amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to accommodate the state's increase. And so if you were telling me that there were design elements or project portions of the project that could be cut in order to have cost savings, but you've expressed that this is exactly the project that existed at the beginning. There's not like we've added on anything, we've asked for anything additional, we haven't changed any design elements or anything like that.
That's correct.
And it's just, I'm really concerned that we're being placed in this position, and I don't know that I can support it.
Well, I'm not fond of the position either, but the alternative is that we don't proceed with the project this year, or potentially it would be undetermined when we would proceed with the project. It affects not only us, but it affects South Euclid, and it certainly affects, the public that uses Cedar Road. I'm not fond of the fact that ODOT only gave us till Wednesday. I mean, that's disgraceful. But the fact is this is where we are, and we can protest that by not voting for this, but that would be a Pyrrhic victory. Cedar Road looks terrible. It looks like, we get all the complaints about the condition of that road right now, and it needs to be repaved, needs to happen this year, and this has to happen in order for that to happen. And it's unsavory, I don't like it either, but here we are.
So I have
Mr. Kuhn.
So the project's approximately $130,000 in addition that University Heights needs to pay. 1/3 of that would be the responsibility of South Euclid.
Correct, but because we're the lead local
Right.
agency, we gotta put it up first.
Right, we put up.
Then we bill South Euclid.
South Euclid, their next council meeting is March 28th.
Right, but we are the ones that put
Right,
it
I
on,
understand. So if South Euclid were to decide to not reimburse above and beyond, then we're on the hook, essentially.
Well, I have written representation from South Euclid that they are backing and they're willing to pay their third. If they don't do that, well, then we've got a bone to pick with South Euclid. But I don't anticipate, I'm taking them at their word, they are committed to paying the third.
And if
In fact, I think their spending authority is different. I think the administration can commit to the third.
Right. And with if we were to not commit to the funding, then the project may not happen at this time. But essentially, so.
Right. And it would be undetermined when we would do the project. I don't believe we would get a third bite of the apple on this project.
Mayor, I have some questions. So you mentioned in your statement TLCI items. What did you refer to with that?
There are some curb bump outs, mid-block crossing, stamped concrete, some of those elements that are part of the overall paving project.
So in my line of work, especially when I work with government entities, the budget is the budget, and costs go up every year, and sometimes we have cost overruns. Typically what happens is the value engineer things out of the project to get it back in line with the budget. Maybe the city engineer could let us know, has there been any value engineering attempt on this project yet?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so that's something that maybe we could look at because, stamped concrete, that's an added cost, and bump outs and crosswalks, that sort of thing. Those are things we don't have now. I kind of just thought we were repaving this road. We're not just resurfacing it. What's the scope of the project?
It is essentially resurfacing. In the asphalt parts, not in the concrete part through Cedar Center, but on the outside. And then we had those items of concrete bump out or curb bump outs, and then the mid-block crossing and vein.
Okay.
Yeah. And those were part of the NOACA study, and they suggested we put that in there.
I remember that. Okay.
And we put it in there. Yeah.
So let's just hypothetically, if we value engineered that out of the project to get this back in line with the budget, that's something that we could add later, correct? Because we get NOACA grants, we've gotten money before for these sort of things. Is that money already earmarked in this project for us, for those bump outs, or is that something that we're footing the bill for?
It was part of the eligible cost for the project, meaning, it started as an 80-20 way back when the costs were what they are, but since theirs is capped, our 20% obviously went up. So it's part of the eligible cost, so yes, it was factored in the original project.
So what you're saying
it's not an ineligible cost. Ineligible cost, the city has to pay 100% for it.
Okay, gotcha.
An eligible cost is split, whatever the cost split is.
You're saying 80-20.
Correct.
So 80 to who, 20 to who?
80% federal, 20% for local.
For local, okay. So let's say hypothetically, when the cost went up from 1.8 to 2.3, we were on the hook for that entire increase.
That's correct.
And if we remove something from the project, we're not going to lose funding. Correct?
Well, we don't know what NOACA will ultimately decide. If we take out the the TLCI elements that NOACA thought they were funding, they may not. They may look at that as a reason to not fund, to do it to a split of the 25-15.
Yeah, I have a hard time with this. This is one of the most expensive projects we've done, and I'm a little concerned. I'm not comfortable with it until I see a value engineering plan.
I also want to know where that additional money is supposed to come from.
without the budget being amended. I have an idea that maybe we could amend the motion, and we'd help with the law director and obviously council would comment, but if we approve this with the caveat that finance committee would be held within the next month to amend the budget for the $130,000 and for the, I'm not sure, you call it value add,
Value engineering.
to be presented at that finance committee, because if it's escrowed, it doesn't mean that it's spent. It just means that it's put aside, so we can always get it back if we needed to. Is that something that maybe people are comfortable with?
And I believe the finance director mentioned that before, that we can put the money in escrow and choose not to go forward with the project, portions of the project down the road, correct? Before they start. Is that
The
correct?
money was just set aside. They needed a cash reserve that they could access once council would approve the project in final form. This additional money would be on top of the $1,029,506 that's in escrow right now.
Mr. Kennedy, do you want to comment a bit on amending appropriations?
Yeah, we would have to amend the appropriations that I did discuss that on a call this morning. Given the uncertainty of what was going on today, it was a little quick to put it together, but we would have to amend those appropriations at the first meeting in April, and then I would then send down that amendment to the County Budget Commission to update their records on our appropriations for 2022.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Gould.
The final approval, is there, this plan with the bump outs and everything, is that still coming to us? Or has that already been approved?
Plans have been approved by ODOT already, yes.
Okay.
They were prepared by Stephen O'Bansick and Associates, the subgroup of the city engineer. We participated in the design fee, but they designed it, took it through ODOT, ODOT approved the plans, and then we did.
I see. And is there, how long would it take to do the evaluation that Mr. Rock requested?
When I saw this come to us, I asked for the bid tab, because I wanted to see where the costs were. They will not give me a bid tab as part of their policy until the project is awarded. They put that in writing, so we cannot show those numbers to you. So, I don't know how I would do it. The value engineering, you gotta look at prices, right? I don't know what they cost right now.
When is that supposed to be awarded?
Well, we have to approve our 129, then I'll award the project.
Let's hypothetically say we approve that right now, right?
Yeah.
Then they will show you the specs?
Yes. Well, they'll show me the numbers for the bid numbers.
And we have the option, if we wanted to,
Sure.
to pull back bump
I
outs or
think
whatever
you
it
always
is.
have that option, yes.
So to me, that seems, to put those two additions in a motion, have a finance meeting, and the two additions would be have the finance meeting and then, go through at that finance meeting with the engineer, the value add, and see how we're going to go forward.
If I could suggest we wait for NOACA, though, I don't know when their meeting is.
Sure.
But if they're going to provide more funds, then you don't really need the meeting to value engineer it. And I don't know when that meeting is, Mayor. I think you said it was May.
May.
Yeah.
I don't have the exact date, but the Finance and Audit Committee meets again in May.
I'd still like to see that.
It's a little bit
I'm aside, I like that the project is ballooned, and this is now the second time, and you're hearing people who are recognizing the value of doing the project, but are also kind of pulled to their wits' end of saying, maybe we just pull the plug on this, and if there's this analysis that we can do that would give us options for reducing cost, I'd very much like to see that, especially because I didn't understand that we were able to make amendments to a project that had been approved by ODOT and then bid and then awarded. That you're going to award a project from ODOT and then say, so we wanted you to do bump outs and concrete work and repaving, and by the way, we're taking out this, and that. I didn't know we had the option to do.
By the way, May 13th is the date of the committee meeting.
I can put the analysis together once they see the bills.
So just a question for the law director, is that appropriate to put those two conditions on the motion?
What I'm struggling with is, you're going to have money in escrow and a signed contract, and the contract would be administered by the administration. I don't know that you retain any control over what happens if the money is appropriated, placed in escrow with the signed contract, and what else is there left to do? Now, as a practical matter, if everyone's on the same page, it's not an issue. It's not an issue if council and administration agree that they're not going to move forward with the project unless there's this finance committee meeting and an opportunity to have an analysis done and a meeting of the minds as to how much money is going to be spent and on what it's going to be spent. But in trying to provide you a legal assurance, I'm struggling to do that because, as I mentioned, you're going to have money in escrow, appropriation, and you're going to have a signed contract.
Again, I had a conversation with the executive director of NOACA. There is an expectation that the Finance and Audit Committee will approve. They have not, as a matter of course, not approved these when it's come before them. It's just that they're not going to meet until May 13th. And we're in a position where we need to let ODOT know now. It is my expectation that NOACA, the Finance Audit Committee, will make the approval and that the amount that they are approving is in excess of this additional amount that we're being asked to put up today.
And I have a question about, you mentioned TLCI in your remarks. Do we know if we currently have TLCI funding from NOACA for this project, or did you mention that as a potential new source of funding for it?
Well, we have funding from NOACA from the project, and there's TLCI elements. It's not like a separate grant proposal like Mr. Engelbrecht did for the crosswalks, but because there are TLCI elements, there's the possibility that NOACA would find additional funding beyond the 15-10 split of the 25% from existing unused TLCI money. They can't promise that, but they're going to look for that. So there may be additional money in addition to the 15-10 split that they could locate. This is the money in the couch cushions.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah,
Exclusion.
I just want to comment to the rest of council that if we did remove those blowouts and other elements of that fashion, that would drastically impact the ability for us to get funding, the TLCI funding for that.
It is separate funding, TLCI. They do have a pot of money for that, NOACA. We don't have any in this project right now.
But there's potential.
But it has the potential for new funding.
Right. Great.
But there could be potential to fund it a later date if we don't do the bump outs and choose to do it next year or like after the road's done. I mean, I hate for people to go through construction twice, but if there's money and we can get it done on someone else's dime, why wouldn't we explore that?
Well, right, which is why I'm suggesting that we make the motion and approve the 129,420, because I believe we will get the money. That is the representation we've gotten. These are items that we expect will be paid on somebody else's dime at the May meeting. If they're not in there, they won't be making the payment because they're not going to pay for something that's no longer in the project.
I hear belief, I hear expectation, I hear concerns. Nobody's guaranteeing us.
That's because they haven't met yet. They don't meet until May 13th. I cannot provide a guarantee or representation for how the committee will vote. Neither could Grace Gallucci.
So I think this conversation just amplifies the angst with budgetary needs in the city. I also am disappointed that we have 3 days or whatever it is to approve this. I mean, this is time and time again. I don't, our hands are always tied when it comes to the county, every single time, and it's really not fair. And I don't know, Mayor, if you have somebody, that can advocate for these smaller cities, but it's just a shame. I mean, at this point, I feel that, we have to approve it, and then when May 13th comes, if they do not give us the full amount, then we have to amend the budget for $130,000. I mean, that's just what it comes down to, and that's going to be a tough decision in
Something else
of itself.
to be correct.
So I will make a motion to approve it, but I just, as a comment, that if we do not receive this money, budget's going to have to be amended by $130,000, $129,420.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weiss. We have a motion then to approve the additional $129,420 and the conditions that Mrs. Weiss has also laid forth. Mr. Kennedy, it sounds like you had something.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody that since we're paying for the project up front, we're going to have to appropriate this money anyways. So that should be part of the, whatever the conditions are that's being approved. We have to add this to the cost of the project because we are going to expend it and then we have to recover it as revenue from the other entities.
I see, because whether the portion we recover from South Euclid, the portion that NOACA provides, we still have to appropriate.
Yeah, we're not sure on the timing of when the county money comes in.
Right.
Nobody knows if that's coming in during the project, on a progress billing. It's after the project's completed, so I just want to make sure that we have the authority. I'll prepare something for the next meeting to increase the appropriations.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second, Mayor.
Okay, second by Mr. King. Any further discussion on this motion?
I would agree with Mr. Rock about taking a look at the information that comes in once it's approved, apparently. Once they pass it, we will see it for review.
So. All right, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any further discussion on the motion? Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Linville? Nay. Mr. Rock?
Nay.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Nay.
Mr. Pudding?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Okay, by a vote of 3-3, the motion fails. All right. We will then, does this close the agenda, Mr.
I believe it does.
Okay. All right.
Unless someone wants to offer comment or motion for reconsideration.
Yeah, I mean, this basically kills the Cedar Road project, right?
I would argue it does not kill the Cedar Road project. I would argue that we could VE, value engineer the project, and rebid it like any other government entity would do with government funds. It happens every day in my business.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rock. We will then move on to item H, which is a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing legal proceedings, personnel, and real estate matters. We do have one item for executive session, legal proceeding update. Is there a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing that legal proceeding update at the conclusion of the regular portion of the meeting?
So,
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gould. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blackfield?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Mr. Cooney?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
It'll be brief.
Very good, thank you. All right, reports and communications from directors, finance, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be getting out revenue, expense, statement of cash, and investment portfolio reports for the months of January and February. Thought I would have those done by now. We have uploading our budget from the budget module into the financial system, but there's a couple of glitches there I have to correct, but I will get those out to you this week. We were kind of tied up too. We had two pretty substantial retro pays for both the local 860 contract and the FOP contract for police. Some of the provisions of the contracts changed, and because they went back more than a year, we had some pretty significant computations to go through to adjust for everybody's hourly rate, which we had to apply to overtime and to longevity payments and all the incidentals. I would like to thank Denise Ballant, who's in finance, does all the payroll for us. She did a remarkable job getting those done, particularly since I was out more than a few days the last couple of weeks. So kudos to her for that. As I said, the Escrow Fund is, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with that. That money's been segregated from our cash at Dollar Bank. I'll talk to the mayor and Mr. McConville probably tomorrow and see how we move forward with that. And that's about all I have. I will prepare a first amendment to the budget for council's consideration at the April meeting if anything changes related to the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mrs. Weiss.
thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kennedy, with all of those retro pays, how is our cash looking?
Cash is okay for the moment, and that's exclusive of the $1 million that's sitting to the side that was there for ODOT. We do get the first half collections from the county for property taxes in January and February, so that helps the beginning of the year. We'll get subsequent distributions for second half. And I think this year, probably July and August, they're going to delay collections a little bit. And now that we're back on a regular cycle with the Regional Income Tax Agency, and returns are due, I believe, the 16th this year, people are more in line with a regular payment schedule consistent with what we experienced like in 2019. So the cash at the beginning of the year is not the issue. It's when you get probably 3/4 of the way through the summer because you have no more property tax collections. And the bulk of your income tax collections, at least for individuals, comes in before the months of May and June. So, but so far so good right now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Does that conclude your report?
That concludes unless anybody has any other questions.
Yes. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to provide council with a brief update on University Square. We anticipate getting our final appraisal for the properties at University Square this week. As soon as we are in receipt of the final appraisal, the city is prepared to send out notices of intent to acquire to both the owner of the core retail parcel and the owner of the garage parcel. That will start the clock ticking on our filing for eminent domain, which can happen as soon as 30 days after those notices are sent. So we anticipate having a busy week in connection with University Square. I've had initial discussions with Mrs. Weiss with respect to a Charter Review Commission ordinance. I anticipate that we will be talking further this week. and that you will have an ordinance for your consideration at your first meeting in April with respect to the creation of a Charter Review Commission. I drafted 2 ordinances that went to committee or that have been recommended to go to committee. One was considered this evening, which is an ordinance to update our code for asphalt provisions. I don't want to steal Mrs. Bleinfeld's thunder, but she can report to you further on that. And then a second ordinance that I sent to Mr. Gould for his committee's review in connection with fireworks exhibitions. I will have a memo for you at your next meeting with respect to Ordinance 2216, and I'll deliver the remainder of my report in executive session.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McConville. Any questions for Mr. McConville? Very good, thank you. Public Safety Police, Chief Roberts is on vacation this week. He's excused and there's no report. Public Safety Fire, Chief Burker.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. 2 items to report this evening. This week starts the Ohio Severe Weather Awareness Week. It started Sunday. Each day has a theme that can be found on the National Weather Service. Yesterday's was being prepared and making a plan. We've posted on our social media some information from the County Emergency Management Office on how to make a plan and be prepared. The theme is spring storm season starting. When we have a storm come through and multiple power lines down and trees, etc., to please stay inside. I know many members in our community take it upon themselves to notify the utility company, which is good. We also encourage them to also notify the fire department so we can go out and determine a safe area, cordon it off, and try to keep people safe, because it's not always just the line that's down. It could be generating power to additional lines downstream, fences, aluminum siding, and even wet ground. So we really encourage people to stay away and have us come out and evaluate. Second item is that we'll be doing hydrant flushing and flow testing during the month of April, and I'll provide you some further details in the first meeting of April. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief Burka? Thank you, Chief. Service, Mr. Corning.
Only one item this evening, just a reminder to the council and the community that April Flat Rush, and that will go through the month of April. And so it's time to start cleaning up the yards again as part of your spring duties.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Corning. Any questions for Mr. Corning? Thank you, sir. Housing and Community Development, Mr. Engelbrecht.
The one thing I'd like to report to council, registering the properties. We did a physical audit of all files in the department and found several who did not in the past year plus register their properties with the city. So we sent out notices to everybody that was delinquent in filing with the department. One of the things that we found was that with all of the new sales that happened within the last year, one of the things that the department had to catch up on was the collection of data from the new owners on if they we're collecting that data now with notices in writing from the people who recently purchased properties in the city who purchased a property that might have been rented out before and are now letting us know that they're no longer renting out the property. That's a few of them. Most of the notices that have gone out have been to people that knew better, along with new property owners who are renting out their properties. And we have been setting up those inspections with Tom Ingram. He's booked for the next 3 weeks solid, based on the input that we've received from the folks that own properties in the city. I just want to update council on that. The department is also still planning for Juneteenth. And that's moving along nicely. And I'll be working with Kelly pretty soon on coming up with a motion to accept the funds for the TLC Hydrant. Got nothing else.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Just to kind of recap, though, on that first item, members of council may be aware of folks in the community who purchased a home that was once a rental and now they are an owner-occupier of the home. And if they receive one of these letters, well, they may look at it and say, well, I'm not a landlord, I don't know why I got this letter. Well, it's kind of a high-class problem for us to have as a city that we have some rentals that are no longer rentals but are now owner-occupied. We just need something in writing from the owner-occupant that they are now the owner-occupant of the property so that we can put it in the file and close out the fact that it was a rental and now it no longer is. So if you get a call or an email from someone who says, hey, I got one of these letters, just send Mr. Engelbrecht an email and let them know. Let our housing department know that this is no longer a rental. You bought it, you live in it now. And welcome to the city. We're glad to have you here. All right. Any questions from Mr. Engelbrecht? All right, very good. Thank you. I did skip over building. Mr. White is ill, and that's why he's not here. He's excused from this meeting. City engineer, Mr. Chin.
No further report.
Okay, thank you. Communications. Yes.
Mr. Chin, would you just forward the communications from the state making the requests for the expedited payment?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Communications civic engagement. Mr. Cook is on vacation. He's excused, and there is no report, which now takes us to economic development. Mrs. Drucker?
No report.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Drucker. That then takes us to the reports of standing committees. We'll start with building and housing. Mrs. Blankenship.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, just prior to the regular council meeting, Building and Housing Committee did meet for continued discussion regarding the point of sale inspection process. For all intents and purposes, we've closed the loop and are grateful to members of the community and realtors who do business getting residents to come live in our community or to sell their homes for sort of sparking that whole conversation. It's been determined that overall, especially thanks to Mr. Engelbrecht and his attention to detail in how the code is written and why, that how it stands presently is how it should be followed, both for safety and for maintenance of a beautiful aging housing stock. With that said, there is always room for discussion and we welcome it, and there may be some items that are determined to be in question, and that can always be a further discussion and determined if it is indeed something that should have been cited or not. Something that dovetails with that, and that's something that we'll be exploring in the future months' meetings, have to do with the previously mentioned ordinance regarding how the codified ordinance looks at maintenance of exterior property areas. And Mr. Engelbrecht has let our law director and myself know that actually he is identifying all sorts of other sections of the code that probably will fall into this same category that need further explanation and more robust discussion so that we can bring before council an ordinance that addresses many of these concerns rather than just piecemealing them, not unlike what we're going to do with our zoning code. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Blank. Thank you for your continued work on that. Community outreach, Mr. King.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Technology Advisory Commission met on March 8th for a presentation by Paul Hugenberg of Array and Associates regarding their technology audit of the city. I want to thank co-chairs sorry, I mispronounced his name, and Christine Hudak, and the rest of the Technology Commission for their efforts during this process. The presentation, members of council voted to begin the RFP process to secure a managed security service provider to take over management of the city's IT infrastructure. I'll be working with the committee co-chairs on the RFP and hope to have something issued in April. Thank you. That's my report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. King. Economic Development, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor. During the retreat, the council came up with goals for every committee, and in the Economic Development Committee, the 3 goals were zoning, zoning, and zoning. So I think that's important. But it is my understanding that the work on the new zoning code will soon be underway. I'm very excited about it. So with that said, I would like to schedule a meeting sometime in April, could be even in May, to begin our process of formalizing a steering committee. It's important that we have to have that committee formalized. The last time that I was part of the zoning process was a number of years ago. I do remember that the steering committee that was compiled included administration, members of council, 2 members of ARB, that's the Architecture Review Board, 2 members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, 2 members of Planning Commission. It included residents, a JCU representative, and members from the business community. I do remember this group being quite large, so maybe we want to condense that, but that's something we can discuss in the committee, what that would look like. So I'll reach out to Kelly in the next week or so to start polling dates for the end of April. It's not a super rush right now. From what I understand, ZoneCo is going to be doing their process in modules. So module 1, 2, 3, 4, and the committee would begin its extensive work during module 3. So there's still a little bit of time, but I would like to get at least the committee formalized and have.
Finance, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There will be I'm going to be scheduling a strategic planning committee, which is a subcommittee of the finance committee shortly, to discuss long-term strategy for the city.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Cooney.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney. Safety, Mr. Gould.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Mrs. Sachs is not here. Is there a report from Service and Utilities?
Yes, Mayor. Mrs. Sachs had asked me to read her report. There was a meeting of the Service and Utilities committee that was held on Tuesday, March 15, 2022. And her remarks are as follows. Increasing awareness, education, and program promotion of the 2020 solid waste study continued with a presentation by Zoe Apostol, who is the Director of Residential Service for the Rust Belt Rider. The committee made a formal recommendation that administration proceed with implementing participation in their neighborhood drop-off program in a centrally located public space that is accessible 24/7, 365 days a year. For residents, the subscription service costs $10 per month, and residents may purchase a weekly home pickup and swap for $30 per week. After that, the committee continued its discussion regarding recycling. We agreed upon initial goals to improve cost of recycling through improvement of UH's recycling rate, which is currently at 5%. Few important factors that need to be pointed out. Number 1, recycling in University Heights is an opt-in service. It's voluntary. Perhaps that's why the numbers are so low. Number 2, can ruin the entire load. Number 3, loose recycling is an important factor to increase the recycling rates by decreasing the contaminated recyclables. And then 4, purchasing 4,064-gallon bins for an unknown number of households who actually recycle, again, it's opt-in, is the epitome of wishful thinking and wishful recycling. We want to change that. There were comparisons made between neighboring cities that engage in backyard blue bag recycling and backyard loose recycling and curbside automated. According to the Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District in the 2020 annual report card, I have 4 different cities here. There's Shaker Heights, who also does backyard pickup, but they do loose recycling in the backyard. Their recycling rate is 9%, so a little double ours. Pepper Pike also does backyard pickup. They do not do loose, but they have bagged blue bag backyard recycling pickup. And their recycling rate is at 11%. Our neighbor to the north, South Euclid, does curbside pickup. Their rate is actually less than Pepper Pike's, even though it is curbside. It's at 10%, and Beechwood is at 13%. So they're all within a couple percent of each other. In Cuyahoga County, over 69% of the county, or more than 2/3, which are curbside, manual, and automated, collections are less than 13%. So what this solid waste district's annual report card is indicating is that the metrics in Shaker, Pepper Pike, Beechwood, and South Euclid are within the county average, and they have mixed between curbside and backyard. The analysis of this data indicates 3 main relevant points: that backyard collection, either loose or bag, can achieve nearly the same or better recycling rates than curbside. Other cities with backyard recycling collection implement best practices that University Heights may be able to adopt in order to improve our recycling. And practices that may actually reduce the rate include automated curbside recycling with 64-gallon bins if they are used for solid waste or there's contamination within the recyclables, or residents unable to continue their opting in. The bottom line here is the recommendation for administration to prepare, present, and implement backyard collection of both solid waste and loose recycling with the goal of improving the University Heights recycling rate while lowering its cost. I encourage as many residents as possible to attend the Service and Utilities Committee meetings in person, or you can join by Zoom, or watch them on the city's YouTube channel at your convenience. And I encourage your feedback to the mayor, copy me, so she's saying herself, to help us hear your voice in this important matter. And then one thing she wanted to note was that the cost savings that the mayor was referencing is due primarily to the reduction of service staff. So during the solid waste study, I was part of that as well, the savings that were being referenced by switching to curbside takes into account that there would be layoffs in the service department, which the administration did not want to entertain. So we felt that there really would not be a cost savings. And that both the cost savings is not being transparently cited for both the informal service and utilities recommendations and the proposed missing survey questions. That completes her report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roth. Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you. There is a Committee of the Whole meeting on March 30th from 6 to 8 to begin the discussion with departments on the facilities assessment and to formally create a subcommittee for facilities and infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Reports from special committees and the taking of action thereon. Are there any reports? Seeing none. Is there any unfinished or miscellaneous business? Seeing none. Before we proceed then further, we have an executive session to go enter. I do not anticipate there will be any formal action taken following that executive session, except for a motion to adjourn. So we're going to recess at this point so that we'll go to the other room for executive session. If you do not stick around, thank you for being here. Our next regular meeting is Monday, April 4th here in this room at Wyland. So thank you for being here, and be well, be safe, and have a good day.